I, 20M, come from a shit show of a family. One of my uncles is a raging narcissist, but everyone still talks to him, unfortunately. I will call him Frank. Yesterday, we had a small family dinner since it's my grandmother's birthday. Frank and his wife Sarah are awful to Frank's daughter from his first marriage, Clara, 18F. I would never stop if I explained it all, but all you need to know is that Clara is innocent. They hate her for no reason. Frank hosted a family dinner yesterday, and they were trying to use Clara as a servant. She had already cooked most of the food, and they were trying to make her clean up. She had enough and called her stepbrother, her stepdad's son, to collect her. I've met her stepbrother a few times, and he's a very nice guy, but he does not mess around about his sisters, Clara included. He used to have major anger issues, but he's calmer nowadays. Her stepbrother arrived, and Frank said that he wasn't going to let Clara leave until she washed all the dishes. Other cousins offered to help, but he said that since she made all the dishes, because she did all the cooking, she had to wash them. He then hid her shoes and phone so she couldn't leave. For the first time ever, my mother and other elders were standing up to him and demanding that he let her go home, but he wasn't budging. An argument started. You know, the type where all the kids are cleared out of the room. Clara started crying and was just going to do the dishes, but I was like, no way. I went outside to her stepbrother's car, and turns out one of Clara's cousins from her mom's side was also there with him. They asked what was taking so long, and I informed them of the situation. This is where I might be the asshole, since I knew these two would go in the house and get Clara out by any means necessary. I let them in, and all I can say is that Clara's shoes and phone were returned immediately. I stayed outside, and I am not lying when I say that those men shouted so loudly the windows were shaking. Her stepbrother and cousin also then took a pair of Frank's shoes, TV remote, and a few other things just because they could. Now, everyone is mad at me. My mother is saying I was an AH because they were trying to get the situation sorted, which is true. That was the first time I saw anyone stand up to Frank. She said now that I got Clara's maternal family involved, things are a million times worse. Clara's older brother, not the stepbrother, who is also Frank's son who couldn't make it to the family dinner, has completely disowned his father and is refusing to return a car and lawnmower he borrowed. They are demanding I apologize to Frank and that I also ensure his belongings are returned to him. I don't think I am an a-hole because it's his fault he refused to let Clara go, but my sister told me to post here.
Comment 1. NTA. It sounds like even though they were finally standing up to Frank that he wasn't listening. You involved the only people he'd have no choice to listen to. The adults should have been standing up for Clara all along. They missed any opportunity that he'd ever listen to them. They stood back watching and enabling Frank for too long. It's their fault that things escalated to the point they did. If you apologize to Frank, then you are no better than all the other adults in your family validating Frank's and his wife's actions. If Frank wants his things back, then he can get them himself. The only ours are the adults who watched a child be abused for years and continued to let it happen, parents included. Comment 2. NTA. It sounds like even though they were finally standing up to Frank that he wasn't listening. You involved the only people he'd have no choice to listen to. The adults should have been standing up for Clara all along. They missed any opportunity that he'd ever listen to them. They stood back watching and enabling Frank for too long. It's their fault that things escalated to the point they did. If you apologize to Frank, then you are no better than all the other adults in your family validating Frank's and his wife's actions. If Frank wants his things back, then he can get them himself. The only ours are the adults who watched a child be abused for years and continued to let it happen, parents included. Comment 3. NTA. Clara's maternal family and you looked out for her safety and welfare. Do not apologize to Frank. If he wants his shit back, he can ask for it from those who have them. If your mother thinks that you standing up for Clara made things worse, I'd be rethinking if she would stand up for me against Frank. And then proceed accordingly. My husband and I have 5 children together. Our last baby was born 5 weeks ago. We chose to give our first 4 kids names inspired by their grandparents, our parents. Their names are not directly the same name as our parents but inspired by the person. Summer for our oldest, for my mom, whose name meant summer and was a summer baby, which our daughter is also. Robin for our second, for my Phil, it's a play on his name and robins are his favorite birds. Luca for our third, for my Mill, who always loved that name but felt it was similar to hers and didn't want to do that because she loves the name for a girl. Phoenix for our fourth child, for my dad and has a nickname in common with my dad's name and my dad always found Phoenixes cool lol. For our youngest we ended up with a name inspired by my grandma and my husband's grandma. They had the same first name, sort of, both used the same name but one had a longer more formal name while the other had it as their given name, which made it easier. My grandma was the woman I saw in a motherly capacity after my mom died while I was young, so honoring her was special to me. But we wanted to give our kids their own names, hence the way we chose to honor. The choice for our youngest child's name was controversial with my stepmother. She and my dad met when I was 8, married when I was 12 and my mom died when I was 6 for context. She saw me as her daughter for a long time but stopped seeing me that way mostly when she realized I didn't return her affection in that way, because while I like her enough, I don't regard her as my mother figure and never ever considered calling her mom. I never considered honoring her with one of my kids' names. But this has upset her given our youngest's name. Also the fact she has 2 kids with my father but both are disabled and won't be having their own children, so she doesn't get to experience it like my dad did. She told me all of this and she expressed that she feels like I was disrespectful to her and her efforts to be a mother to me, efforts I always rejected, but she feels I should have shown love and appreciation for in the naming of my children when all other parents were honored. Comment 1. Natar for not naming your kid after her. But you should reconsider how much effort you put into the relationship and try to put in more. She clearly cares about you a lot. And you even remark how you don't put as much in. She's not your mom, she'll never be your mom, but she has been in your life for 20 years and for major life moments. How do your other kids refer to her? Comment 2. I'm just sitting at nah. NTO would imply that your stepmom is in a hole, and I'm just not getting that vibe. In your description, you don't describe her as anything but a decent person who tried to be some sort of mother figure. More importantly, you don't describe her as someone who was wanting to erase your mother and step in as if nothing happened, declaring I am your mother now. She sees all the grandparents being honored, and she views these kids as her grandkids. This is all not to say you're the a hole either, i.e. nah. You name your kids how you name your kids, and based on what you wrote it's not like you named the youngest honoring you and your husband's grandparents simply to spite stepmother. I can understand her being hurt, and I can see your reasoning for naming your kids how you named them. So for some context, my sister, 25 years old, and I, 23 years old, both live together under our dad's roof. My sister has 3 kids. A 7 months baby, a 4 years old and a 6 years old. The 2 kids have a different dad than the baby that they both live with during the school year. My sister keeps them during the summer. This is a relatively new agreement, made around the time they finally filed for divorce around a half a year to a year ago. Basically long enough she should have come up with a plan, but not long enough for her to have experience taking care of her 2 kids with her now having a job and a baby. She does have the baby in daycare, but as for her other 2 kids she cannot afford to put them in daycare or summer camp or what have you. Her schedule also conflicts with the daycare schedule, meaning that she works Saturdays and the daycare is closed Saturday. Most of the time this means she's calling our dad to come get the baby and take care of her for a while. I am a ZAM, stay-at-home mom for the uninitiated. I basically run our household. I have an 18-month toddler I care for at home, and my partner, who also lives with us, works a varied schedule. My dad works a varied schedule as well, but both him and my partner do manual labor. Now, to the meat and potatoes. I'm getting stuck with babysitting duty for her 2 kids. We honestly tried to work things out, but I told her I didn't want to care for them while she worked the entire summer because they're chaotic gremlins and I am a high-strung individual as it is. The first week was a lot easier because of the varying schedule of my partner and father, plus we had family visiting, so they were always being watched/entertained by someone. They need constant adult supervision or else they turn into Tasmanian devils. I told my sister that she needed to find other arrangements since we're all hitting burnout, but even I'm at a loss for what she can do. I'm stuck between that's not my problem and I wouldn't know what to do either. But I don't want to continue to risk my sanity, so I bowed out today. My dad did too and they got miffy with each other over it. She decided to take the day off and come care for her kids, but I have no idea what she's gonna do tomorrow. Either way, I feel bad, and I must know. Comment 1, NTA. There was no harm in her asking if you could watch them, but she should have respected your answer when you said no. You being a stay-at-home parent does not equal free babysitting. Her kids are old enough now to get into all kinds of trouble, and with a house to look after and your own toddler, I can't imagine trying to keep an eye on 2 other kids that you always have to keep a close watch on. Comment 2. If your sister lives in the US and makes under a certain income, she may qualify for free daycare at a licensed daycare facility. I work at an aftercare and we have kids whose fee is paid for by the state. I'm not sure, but depending on where you live she may also be a candidate to get money each month from the Gov to help care for the children. Don't quote me on this, but it's something to look into for when the children are with her. Comment 3. This is an unpopular opinion, but if I'm being honest I think ESH in this case. I completely agree and understand that it isn't your responsibility to care for her kids in any way. However, I do believe that family needs to look out for each other and if you can you should help your sister. That doesn't give your sister the right to take you for granted or just to expect you to be her babysitter. I think you all could work something out and she needs to be respectful of your time and obligations. It's probably easier said than done. I've dealt with more than my fair share of entitled family members. I have a 26-year-old stepdaughter Violet who is not a very nice person. I swear I'm not being a wicked stepmother, she just doesn't like anyone and believes she is above all of us. I have a 25-year-old daughter Tessa and they have been in each other's lives since 14-13. From day one Violet wouldn't speak to any of us. Actually, it would be easier to count the people Violet will speak to. Her father encouraged her but you can't force a kid to speak. Tessa wanted to friends with Violet's friends but that never worked out since Violet wanted nothing to do with her. However, I monitored them very closely and never heard Violet making fun of Tessa or saying anything negative to her. I checked in with Tessa as she said there was no bullying at school, but if she tried to talk to Violet, Violet would just stare at her. Her father did try to work with her on being polite, so you guessed it, she stopped speaking to him as well. Tessa continued to resent that she couldn't get into Violet's friend group, they were the popular kids, and began calling Violet a mean girl, which upset my husband. Tessa and Violet haven't seen each other in years as Violet spends every holiday with her boyfriend's family, well really only his mother. She won't speak to anyone else. Look, I understand it is weird and unpleasant behavior but to me it isn't bullying. Violet's fiancé even says he thinks she just really enjoys not speaking to people, like it is an adrenaline rush for her. Tessa has struggled as she feels Violet is rewarded for this, not by her father and I, just life in general. She is very successful / makes a lot of money. She continues to tell people that Violet bullies her and it just isn't true. Well, Violet is getting married and Tessa and I aren't invited. Tessa was telling people how Violet bullied her their entire childhood. This annoyed me and I asked her what Violet ever did to her beyond ignore her, and again she could not answer. I finally snapped at her that she doesn't know what bullying is and I don't like her spreading these lies. Tessa blew up and said Violet is Regina George and I'm being insensitive. Comment 1. My sister has been very careful to not do or say anything where my mother could hear. She was a massive bitch in school with getting her friends to say mean things, do nasty things in her behalf. I doubt that Violet the angel you are making her out to be. You will never get to the truth now that you have permanently destroyed your daughter's faith in you. YTA. Comment 2. YTA. Violet may have been cold and distant, But dismissing Tessa's feelings is not cool. Ignoring someone can be super hurtful, especially when it's constant, and can totally feel like bullying. By telling Tessa she's lying, you're invalidating her experience and pain. It's important to listen to her and acknowledge how Violet's behavior affected her. Instead of shutting her down, maybe try to understand her perspective and support her feelings. Dismissing her as spreading lies only adds to her hurt. Comment 3. YTA. I doubt your daughter would tell you more about what happened because it sounds like you just dismiss and minimize what she does tell you. This is her truth. Ignoring can be bullying. My daughter was bullied by the mean girls on a club soccer team simply because she was new and not part of the bestie friend group. They went out of their way to ignore her at practice, team building events, and team social gatherings. They even encouraged other players on the team to ignore her, and the other new girls. It was absolutely bullying by excluding her and making her feel othered. Your stepdaughter also sounds like an R, and all of you should go North Carolina with each other.